I mean, I just admire her game, like her competitive fire, and obviously her shooting is great, but I think she does so many other things that contribute to winning basketball.
The morning sunlight filtered gently through the curtains of Nizzy Clark's modest kitchen, illuminating the familiar wooden table where she had spent countless evenings guiding her daughter Caitlin through homework, listening patiently to her dreams, and quietly offering encouragement while silently calculating the sacrifices required to keep those dreams alive. And now, years later, her hands trembled slightly as she clutched an envelope that had arrived by special delivery. Its surface, marked by Caitlin's careful handwriting with the simple yet haunting words for Mom, "Please read alone," written across the front in blue ink. Words that seemed to carry the gravity of a lifetime compressed into a fragile moment. And, staring at the envelope, felt the strange paradox of life's greatest triumphs, that sometimes achieving our most cherished dreams can feel eerily close to failure when we begin to grasp the true cost borne by others, the unspoken sacrifices, the sleepless nights, the silent worries, the deferred ambitions. And as she sat frozen, she wondered whether opening this letter would bring her pride, closure, or heartbreak, for what she was about to uncover was not merely a daughter's note of thanks, but a confession of guilt, gratitude, and profound love, a revelation of the emotional burden Caitlin had been carrying silently for years. And did not yet know was that this exchange of letters, Caitlin's late-night confession, and the secret unsent, letters Anne herself had been writing throughout her daughter's journey, would become a turning point in their relationship, transforming the way they understood each other and redefining what it truly meant to honor the sacrifices of those who love us most. And on that quiet April morning in 2024, barely 3 days after Caitlin had been drafted first overall by the Indiana Fever, 3 days after the moment that should have been the most unambiguously joyous in their family's history, Anne's kitchen became a stage for an unseen drama, because as much as the world celebrated Caitlin's achievement, and had already noticed during the draft ceremony that her daughter's smile carried a shadow, her eyes a distant heaviness, as though the weight of something unspoken pressed down harder than the golden opportunity she had just seized. And now, holding the letter written on New York hotel stationery, and immediately recognized the handwriting that she had once seen scrawled across spelling tests and scrawled playbooks. Only this time it was steadier, deliberate, carrying the weight of each word as though they were carved rather than written, and with a deep breath she unfolded the paper to find her daughter's soul pouring out in ink. "Dear Mom, I'm sitting in my hotel room at 2 a.m. unable to sleep because I keep thinking about everything you gave up for me to reach this moment. And I know you're probably expecting me to tell you how happy I am or how grateful I feel for this opportunity. But the truth is I'm drowning in guilt because I finally see clearly what my dream cost you." And Anne's eyes welled as she read, because she had indeed given up more than anyone else had ever seen. Years of missed opportunities, countless financial compromises, the quiet selling of valuables to cover travel expenses, the willingness to relocate their entire life around Caitlin's schedules, and above all, the postponement of her own personal desires, passions, and ambitions so that Caitlin could chase her dream without the shadow of practical burdens. And yet, she had never once told her daughter of the moments she felt torn, lonely, or exhausted. For mothers are trained by instinct to protect, to absorb the weight silently, and to carry on as if their sacrifices are invisible threads that hold together the dreams of others. But now, Anne realized her daughter had noticed, not in the rushed hours of adolescence, perhaps, but in the long reflections of maturity. And Caitlin's words cut deep because they were a mirror held up to all the choices Anne had made. Choices she sometimes second-guessed in the privacy of her unsent letters. Letters she had written late at night on scraps of paper, in spiral notebooks, sometimes even on the back of grocery lists. Letters that were never intended to be read but served as her quiet confession. Her way of processing her feelings about watching her daughter rise, while she herself receded into the background. And in those private writings, Anne had poured out fears, frustrations, and sometimes loneliness, but also immense pride, joy, and an unshakable sense that everything she did was worth it, because Caitlin's victories, whether small tournaments or the monumental draft, felt like shared victories, even if the world never saw Ann's invisible hand behind them. And now, in the face of this tangible letter from Caitlin, Ann realized that both of them had been writing to each other in silence for years, both attempting to protect the other from the heaviness of truth, both guarding love by withholding pain. Yet now, as she read line after line of Caitlin's trembling honesty, her confessions of feeling unworthy of her mother's sacrifices, her fears of being unable to ever repay her, her gratitude woven through an undertone of guilt, and felt the invisible wall between them begin to dissolve. Because motherhood had always taught her that love meant shielding, but now she understood that love also meant sharing, allowing the other to see the truth of one's heart. And as she finished reading Caitlin's words under the golden morning light, and thought of her own unsent letters, hidden in a box under her bed, and realized that perhaps the time had come to share them, not to burden Caitlin with guilt, but to show her that sacrifice, though painful, had always been chosen freely, out of love, and that in the strange mathematics of family, what one person gives up becomes not a debt but a gift, one that does not require repayment but only recognition. And as Ann wiped her eyes and folded the letter back into its envelope, she whispered softly to herself, she finally understands, before standing up to retrieve the box of letters that would tell Caitlin, in her own words, that love is not measured by what is lost, but by what is given willingly. And that this shared confession between mother and daughter on that April morning was not a tragedy, but a transformation. The beginning of a relationship built not just on sacrifice, but on mutual truth. And perhaps that was the real victory, one deeper and more lasting than any draft, contract.
Haley Van Lith penetrating up against Enrique for two.
And once they started controlling the boards, then that's when they started to chip away and then eventually...
Caitlin had been carrying this invisible emotional burden for months, perhaps even longer, without realizing how heavy it had grown, until one ordinary afternoon when a seemingly innocent conversation with her grandmother cracked open a truth she had never considered. A truth that landed on her with the force of a physical blow and recontextualized her entire childhood, forcing her to confront the sobering reality that her success had not simply been the product of her hard work and talent, but had been built brick by brick upon the unseen sacrifices of the woman who loved her most, her mother. And that conversation sparked something restless in her, and soon Caitlin found herself obsessively digging into her family's financial history, piecing together fragments of stories she had overheard but dismissed, pulling old bank statements and employment records, and carefully stitching together the narrative of her mother's relentless, systematic selflessness. What emerged filled her with awe, but also with a sickening guilt that she struggled to process. A pattern so consistent and complete that it was clear every decision had been shaped not by Ann's dreams, but by Caitlin's. Late one night in her New York hotel after the WNBA draft, she poured these discoveries onto paper, and the letters she wrote revealed layers of confession, guilt, and love. Mom, it began, I found out about the 3 jobs, about the house you and Dad sold, about the retirement money you quietly spent, about the holidays you never took, and the things you never bought for yourself, because every pound, every dollar went towards my basketball dream. The worst part is that you hid it all so perfectly that I never even knew to say thank you. And sitting at her kitchen table days later, the words blurred through tears as she realized her daughter had uncovered the sacrifices she and Brent had deliberately hidden to protect Caitlin's focus and joy. They had sold the home they once thought they would grow old in, cashed out savings they had intended for their later years, worked themselves into exhaustion with extra jobs, and yet they had wrapped it all in the illusion of stability, so their daughter would never feel the weight of it. But now, with every line, Caitlin demonstrated not just that she knew, but that she finally understood. She wrote of the times she had whined about not having the newest kit or the most prestigious camps, never once stopping to think about what her parents were surrendering to provide even the basics, and she called herself selfish, admitting she had taken their love for granted, unaware of the depth of its cost. Yet, Ann had her own secret, one she had guarded for years, a collection of letters written to Caitlin during every stage of her journey, hidden away in a box in her closet. These letters chronicled not budgets and bills, but emotions, her pride when Caitlin excelled, her fear during injuries, her loneliness on nights when Brent was at work and Caitlin was away at tournaments, her joy so overwhelming that every sacrifice seemed not just bearable but necessary. In those letters, and allowed herself to admit the struggles she would never speak aloud, yet she always circled back to one thing, that the opportunity to support her daughter's dream was the greatest privilege of her life. And so, when Caitlin's letter shifted from confession to promise, the symmetry was profound. "Mom," she wrote, "I cannot give you back the years you spent focused entirely on me, but I can promise you that from now on, your dreams matter too. I've already spoken with advisors about creating accounts for you and Dad. I want you to retire if you want to travel to the places you